Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. I decided with the books I read on my trip, I'm just going to record all the reviews for them at one night. Even though I'm gradually getting sleepy, I think that's okay. I just want to do it while it's still somewhat fresh in my head, honestly. So if my voice sounds very kind of like monotone, like I don't care, it's the opposite. I actually really enjoyed everything I read. It's just I want to get these videos done because I have some long movie reviews I need to record as well. So I've never read any of Shirley Jackson's work. I'd finished reading Sense and Sensibility and I wanted something else to read, and I saw this wasn't the cover of the book that I read, by the way. This is just one that I found online. And there was a book, and the title was just like her name, and it had listed, it was one of those like, and I found another one of these for Oscar Wilde as well, where it's like a collection of like a bunch of the author's stories and stuff, and I saw one of the titles listed on the front cover is Haunting of Hill House. I remembered that there was a Netflix show of that, which I didn't know was originally a book or anything. I didn't know it was like a TV adaptation. And I remembered, oh yeah, that's the series I've had on my Netflix list for like a year that I thought looked cool. Didn't really know what it was about. Looked kind of spooky, and I wanted to watch it. And I still hadn't watched it yet. And I still haven't watched it at the time I'm recording, because I just got back. But now I want to. And I thought, you know what? I'll read the book. Maybe it'll be cool. And then I could watch. This will be my thing that gets me to watch the Netflix adaptation. And I will. Though I think it's like 8 episodes or something. So we'll see. And there's another book. I think it's called We Live in a Castle, or something like that. It's another one of her stories. It was actually also included in this collection. I didn't read it because I wanted to read this one, and then I went back to the library and I saw that they had the Oscar Wilde book, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. And I was kind of running out of days in my trip, because if I ran out of days, I couldn't have access to this library anymore. So this was the only one of hers I read. I really liked the dialogue, though, just the way it was written, so it does make me want to read more of her work. If anything, that was the cool thing with everything I read on this trip, was that it was authors I either kind of heard about or hadn't, and my first time reading some of their stories and stuff, and it kind of just reading, I know I'm reading some of the like really popular ones to start off with, but it kind of gave me a taste of these authors' writing styles, and I'm like, yeah, I liked it, I want to read more. So you might get videos of me doing more. But yeah, I didn't really know anything about Haunting of Hill House. It was kind of confusing for me to read. I don't know if it like qualifies as a novel or not. I mean, it was chapters. It was divided in chapters. It was 8 chapters, but the chapters themselves and the whole thing was like really short. It was only like 100 something pages. I thought maybe that was because it was just within this collection or something, but it didn't seem rushed or anything, so I'm assuming that's the full length of the book, because it's also, sold as like an individual book. I don't know if this is her most popular story or not. I mean, there's a second one, of her stories that also got a Netflix adaptation. This is the only one I had sort of vaguely heard of, so I'm assuming so. I didn't know this was from 1959. Damn. But not the oldest. That's the funny thing to me, that in 2026 that sounds old, but then compared with the other stuff that I read, the the Portrait of Dorian Gray and Sense and Sensibility, this is like the newest in terms of the things I'd read. But yeah, I thought it was good. I don't really read much horror stuff, even though I know I mentioned about the Edgar Allan Poe book, which, man, I still wish I had the video for that where I talked about that book. It was that modernized version of his stories. That was so good. I was almost tempted to read it again, actually. I might buy it. But anyway, yeah, this was good. I need to get more into gothic horror, honestly. I think it's really fun. But yeah, it's about this woman named Eleanor Vance, and she's invited by this doctor guy to go to this house that's called Hill House. So it's her and two other people. Yeah, Luke and Theodora. And that was something I felt like I was confused about a lot of things with this. I don't know if it's just me not paying enough attention or if the story is supposed to be confusing. I feel like when I finished, I was left with a lot of questions. Maybe, again, some of them were things I hadn't really noticed or whatever. Maybe some of them were confusing on purpose, which makes me a little bit scared to watch the Netflix one, if I'm honest, because if this is already just a really short story and it's very confusing, if it's going to be stretched into like a multi-episode Netflix series, that makes me a bit concerned. Like, I was confused. Why were these people being... You know what, let me pull up the Wikipedia page, actually. Let me see if... What is it? Because I know the doctor guy, Dr. Montague, he's there, and he's investigating about the paranormal things that are happening and stuff around this house that he's heard of. Why is it that the people are okay, I didn't remember this. It's people who are chosen because of they've experienced paranormal things. I don't know what paranormal things Eleanor... She definitely goes through some paranormal things when she gets to the house, but I don't know what if she goes through any before she goes to the house, because she's this person who has spent her entire life like taking care of her mother. She has never really had like her own life outside of that, so I don't know how that gives her the opportunity for paranormal events, but whatever. Anyway, she doesn't know any of these people before she's invited. She kind of meets them for the first time, and there's a lot of descriptions in this about the house itself and Eleanor, and her feelings about it even before she enters inside, which was really cool. The house is described as being kind of alive, really. It was kind of interesting because the back of the book had little descriptions, in the back cover of the various short stories, and the one for Hill House just straight up said, yeah, the house has chosen this woman, so I guess it's sentient then. That's kind of interesting, where it can kind of choose its owner. And there's this whole thing that people who end up living in the house, but it seems to only be women for some reason. They end up having mysterious accidents when they move in. So, and there is an accident that happens, or supposedly an accident or whatever, but it's not even when Eleanor, she doesn't actually get to move in to live into the house. She wants to by the end, but she doesn't. She wants to stay, and everyone tells her to leave, and then she dies. I assumed it was caused by the house. I'll talk about that in a minute. But even before she like physically ends up inside, it's described she's having these like uneasy feelings, and at first she's telling the caretaker like, yeah, Mr. Dudley, I'm gonna go in there, I was invited. She's actually a little rude about it, and then when she gets inside, she basically has this thought of like, oh shit, I don't want to be in here anymore, this was a mistake, and that feeling gets kind of worse, and then eventually it gets really weird where suddenly she's really happy to be there, and that was kind of confusing. I don't really know how much of the house has like a because it really only does this with Eleanor. She's very much like the chosen one of the house. How much of an influence the house has over her mind. And it's kind of confusing, but it was kind of cool of like Eleanor, all these really weird things are happening to the people in this house, and they're mostly affected around Eleanor. And it was kind of confusing of like how much of it is like the house, if it's like a sentient, let's say it's like a sentient mysterious being or whatever, with able to do all these crazy stuff, how much of it is like influencing her mind and making her hallucinate things, and how much of it is actually real. It kind of was just really blurry on that a lot of the time, but I sort of liked that. I think that made it more scary and it made me think a bit more. But I want to talk about Eleanor. I like her as a main character. I feel like I kind of relate to her a bit, especially really just like the beginning of the I was gonna say movie, no, at the story. She's this kind of lonely character. Like I said, she's been taking care of her mom her whole life. She's never really kind of had a life of her own outside of that, but she's kind of lonely. She is kind of a bit whimsical and has a very high, I guess, empathy for other people. One of my favorite parts, and I like I said, I really like the writing style and dialogue of this. I actually wrote down some of the quotes. Let me see, did I write them as quotes or did I write them as like just kind of general quotations, paraphrasing, I mean. No, I wrote them as quotes. There's a couple of quotes from her. I should have written the page numbers. I don't have the physical book now. It's back on the cruise ship. I'm at home. But I wrote, so I can't really give page numbers for this, but I can kind of say what the quotes are. There's this part towards the beginning when Eleanor's on the way to Hill House, and she stops at this like diner, and there's this family there, and there's this mom talking to her young daughter, and the little girl has this, it's a cup of stars because it's a cup that has little stars on the bottom. I'm assuming it's like little, it's like a design on the outside of the cup or something, or maybe it's inside and there's like resin on the bottom, whatever. I'm trying to imagine this cup of stars. She has a cup of stars and the mom's like, please, you gotta drink milk but without using your cup. Maybe the mom thinks it's like a too much of like a kid thing, or trying to get her to not be so emotionally attached to the cup. And Eleanor turns to the girl and tells her, and I'm gonna read the quote, but again, I should have written the page numbers. I just thought like, yeah, I'm gonna give the book back and I'm never gonna probably have it again. I was actually writing these quotes for me, but now that I'm talking about it and making this video, it's like I want to read you some of the quotes I like. So sorry about that, but actually I'll just, it's insist in your cup of stars. Once they have trapped you into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again. That's what she tells the girl. I really like that. I just kept thinking about that line of like, once they trap you into being like everyone else, you'll never see the cup again. Just this kind of idea of, we have, they're like taking away your individualism. We have things that we like, we have things that make us, or things about our personality, or things that bring us joy, and other people can see that as like too childish or whatever, or you're not fitting into the box like everyone else, and try to take those things away from you. And it really is that you'll become like everyone else. And Eleanor, treating that as like a very sad thing, I feel like that just kind of hit for me, and then there's this other part later on when she's talking to Theodora. I have to talk about Eleanor and Theodora, where they're outside and they're talking, and Eleanor is saying about how she wants a quiet spot to be able to just relax. It's a quiet spot among the flowers where I can dream and tell myself sweet stories. I just thought that sounded really cute. Honestly, I liked that. I didn't write any quotes from like any of the other characters or anything from like my other books, by the way. It was just those two of things that I read. I just really liked those quotes enough that I was like, okay, I kind of want to write these down. But Eleanor has a lot of kind of like whimsy-ish, sort of like, I almost want to say romanticized view of life. I don't really know if that's like the right sort of phrasing that I just felt like I kind of related to and kind of admired a bit. But I just find her a really interesting character, and I also feel bad for her, where she keeps growing increasingly attached to the other young woman, she ends up meeting Theodora in this house, but also there's all the spooky paranormal things that are happening, and Eleanor's kind of just mentally losing it a little bit, and bad things happen to her, and I'm just like, I almost wish the story could like end after a certain point and she could just go back to her normal life, but anyway, oh yeah, I said I really liked the dialogue in this. There's a lot of parts of this where she befriends this woman named Eleanor, named Theodora, and they spend a lot of time together towards the beginning of the story, and there's parts where they're just like hanging out and chatting, and I'm sorry, I don't really know how to describe the writing style of like the dialogue and everything, but I'll just say from what I remember, it just sounded very natural. It didn't even feel, when you're watching a movie or reading something, anything that's not, just like people, you're like talking to someone in the real world in a sense. And you can tell a lot of the time, I guess because things are written, I don't know, it's just someone writing dialogue. It feels a lot of the time just like it's not how people in the real world would talk. When you watch a movie and you're like, some of these lines, even though they're trying to make it sound natural, sound like movie dialogue, I feel that way sometimes with the books that I read as well. I read a lot of fiction and stuff, maybe that's why. But with this, it's like reading through Eleanor and Theodora's conversations, it really felt like conversations you would have with someone in the real world. It felt very natural. It felt kind of playful the way they talk to each other. There's this one part where they're just listing facts about themselves to each other, and it doesn't come off in like an icebreaker way. It's like they'll mention something and the other person gives a fact about themselves, but it's like sort of related. I know I'm describing it really weirdly, but it's very much this sort of back and forth, but it doesn't feel forced or anything. There's this one chapter where it's literally just one of them is painting the other person's like toenails or something. They're just kind of hanging out, and that's the whole chapter, and they're just like talking about where they're from and stuff. It did kind of suck that it turns out later on that Eleanor's lying a little bit to Theodora, where Eleanor's talking about how she has this why did I just get a text message? Oh, okay, sorry. Someone sent me something serious. Let me just reply really quick. Okay. What was I saying? Oh yeah, they're painting the toes, and Eleanor, yeah, she lies saying that she lives in an apartment, and later on, Eleanor's telling Theodora that she wants to stay in Hill House or something, or no, she wants to move in with Theodora, and Theodora's saying like, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, our time in Hill House can't last forever, you have to go back to your apartment, and I have to go back to my life and stuff. We have our own lives, and Eleanor's like, no, I made that up. I sleep in a cot in my sister's house. I don't have my own apartment and stuff. So the fact that she has to kind of lie to Theodora a bit to sound better than how the circumstances in her life actually are was a little disappointing and kind of sad, especially because it seems like they were genuinely, it's kind of also confusing to me, like they're genuinely getting along at the beginning. I actually almost thought it's just like the way Eleanor has this sort of clinginess to Theodora that made me think, is she having any romantic feelings towards her, maybe, especially because like towards the middle of the story she's suddenly asking Theodora like, hey, can I like just come live with you after we end up leaving this house. And Theodora's like, what are you talking about? And Eleanor's like, it's fine, I'll like get a job and stuff, and I'll go and I'll live with you. And Theodora tells her no, and you know, it's like what I was saying earlier of like, we have our own lives we need to get back to, what are you talking about? And then later on, Eleanor is kind of, you're like reading her thoughts, and she's saying about how like, I'm not gonna let her go, I'm gonna go and live with her, and we're gonna get some cats, and we're gonna do all these things together and have all these beautiful things, and basically planning like an entire life with Theodora, even though Theodora told her no. So I'm like, okay, you have this sort of really strong attachment to her that seems a bit one-sided. But I do like how they are towards the beginning when they're just kind of exploring Hill House together, and they go outside and they talk about like, oh, maybe someday we'll have a picnic here. And then it gets kind of sad where towards the end when there's something that happens with Eleanor and it kind of freaks everybody out, and everyone's kind of concerned about Eleanor. It seems like they were concerned about her mental health, but also that they think she's like causing all this weird stuff to happen, so they're worried about her. And she ends up in some like not safe locations in Hill House. There's this part where she I think almost like ends up in a high place, and they think she's gonna jump off, and they have to like get her down. And after that, they're all like really concerned for her, and they're like, okay, you're not safe here, we need to get you to leave. And Eleanor's, I don't know if the house has like full control over her or something, and she's saying like, no, I can't leave, I don't want to leave. Even if you kick me out, I'm gonna walk all the way back to Hill House or whatever. She just refuses to go home. She thinks she is home, basically, being in Hill House. She views it as home, and Theodora's telling her like, hey, you have to, I'm really worried about you. I was worried you weren't gonna say bye to me, but I'm worried about your health and your happiness, and you need to go home, and it's okay, you can go home, and we can write letters to each other and maybe visit sometimes. And she's like trying to convince Eleanor to go, and saying like, we'll see each other again at some point. It's maybe thinking that's the reason Eleanor doesn't want to go. And then it's sad because she's going to leave and she doesn't want to leave. They like force her into the car, and then she dies, so she doesn't end up with Theodora. And then it's really weird at the end where then it's described like a little epilogue of like the characters just kind of go back to their normal lives, and Eleanor supposedly dies, and there's no comments on like what the other characters feel about it. It's as if Eleanor didn't exist, and it's kind of a bit of a, not tone shift, whiplash, I guess. I don't know if that's like the right thing. But yeah, I was disappointed that that Eleanor couldn't just leave normally and, you know, remain friends with Theodora or something, and, you know, saying goodbye to everyone. It's like, nope, she tries to leave, or she's forced to leave, and then she's killed, presumably by the house or something. I thought if anything, if something was going to happen to her with the house, I thought it was going to be she would be like trapped in there forever as a ghost or something. I actually thought that happens because there's suddenly this part where Eleanor, it seemed like she's kind of just running around the house, and the other characters are looking for her, and she's purposely avoiding them, and says something about them not being able to see her, and something about these two ghosts that are there that are able to see Eleanor and interact with her. So I thought that maybe she like kind of died off screen in a sense, and she's like a ghost now, and that's why the other characters can't find her. And then it turns out she's just in this, she's avoiding them, and she's in this high location, and they're trying to get her to come down, and she kind of snaps back to her senses, and then all of a sudden is views the house, it almost seems brainwashed, and views the house as her own and doesn't want to leave, and then, you know, forced to leave and dies. It's so, it feels so weird where it's like you get a sense of her character at the beginning, and she's like bonding with Theodora and hanging out with these other people, and then all of a sudden it's like, I mean, freaky things are happening as these characters are interacting and such. But you know, as time continues, it seems like Eleanor's mental state really just kind of suddenly shifts and everything. Okay, let me go into my notes. And then even before Eleanor mentions about wanting to move in with Theodora suddenly just seems kind of annoyed by Eleanor and kind of annoyed by her clinginess. That kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. Let me see what else. But the stuff in terms of like spooky things happening with the house is interesting. You end up getting its whole backstory and everything about this family. And the father of the family is really excited. He like got this house for his wife, and then like a couple minutes after they move in, she like suddenly dies or something, and then he has to go and like take her into the house. It's kind of sad, described as something like, oh, it's the house for her, now she has to just die in it and stuff. And he has these 2 little daughters, and the dad also somehow dies. But the girls, the characters like Theodora and Eleanor, they think, oh, the girls, they assume the girls probably hate the house, but it turns out they love the house and they're like fighting over it for years. And I think it's that the younger one really, really wants Hill House for some reason. And then, oh yeah, Luke, I forgot about him. Yeah, Luke Sanderson, I couldn't really remember him much, even though he's like the 3rd main character. Not really main character. It's really Eleanor, and it's really her and Theodora for like most of the story, basically. That's the person Eleanor has the most interactions with. But Luke is also there, and their host is like this doctor guy that's kind of explaining all these weird events. But Luke is also there. I forgot the reason he's important is he's like, his family is the one that owns Hill House. It's just that they don't live in it. The only people that live there or around there is the 2 caretakers. It's this like older couple, seem to be described as kind of grumpy. They're kind of a little bit spooky, honestly, but they don't really seem to play as much of a role towards like later on in the story. But yeah, Luke and his family are the ones that own the house, but they don't live in it or anything. I don't really remember why. But yeah, it's like this whole backstory for Hill House that like a ton of people end up, or specifically it seems like the people that live there end up dying, and now Eleanor is being affected by stuff. But it's this whole thing where there's like these messages of like blood on the wall about like Eleanor come home and stuff, and the characters are noticing. And at first Eleanor gets like kind of freaked out about it. And it gets kind of weird where at first it's like spooky things are happening that all the characters are able to notice, and then it's just Eleanor noticing things, and that's when it gets kind of a bit more confusing as it goes on of, is she hallucinating this stuff? Is it these things are happening? I mean, the house does seem to be sentient, so it's causing these things on purpose, and it's like targeting her and stuff. And the characters think it's really weird, and Eleanor, like, she's very shy, so she just does not want to be the chosen one of this house. And then there's these other characters, I forgot about them, because they show up kind of late into the story. It's the doctor's wife, and there's this guy named Arthur who is in charge of a school nearby. I don't really know why he's there. He's like the headmaster of a boys' school. Who's just traveling with like the doctor's wife, Mrs. Montague. I don't know why this guy's here, but whatever, he's there. They're also interested in stuff with the house. I don't remember them seeing any spooky stuff happening. I think it's just the 4 original main characters. But there's this stuff with like, I don't remember if it was like a Ouija board or something like that Mrs. Montague has, and it like spells out things for Eleanor and spells out her name and a bunch of other stuff. And I think some of the other characters see it. And it's like the ghosts of the house are trying to communicate with Eleanor. I mean, later on, she's able to see the ghosts. She's able to see like the ghost families and stuff. And there's a part where her and Theodora, they end up outside and they see the ghost family there and everything. And it like really freaks out Theodora. There's this one part that was kind of confusing to me where they see this ghost family and Theodora sees something. I don't know what it was, or if it was just not explained. She sees something and she tells Eleanor to leave, and it like really freaks her out, and I don't think you find out what it is. But again, I think that's part of the fun of the book, of the characters are witnessing all this spooky stuff, and sometimes it's just not described what it is. It's just things are happening. So that's going to be interesting if I get to watch the Netflix series. I'm assuming it's still on there. I think it was like a Netflix original, and how they're going to interpret some of this stuff. I feel like if anything, it would make it probably really confusing of what was this thing that happened and whatever. But yeah, the spooky stuff is fun. I did like the characters. I liked the writing. It's just the ending, I don't know how I feel about it, where it kind of feels more sad than scary. Of like, the characters want Eleanor to leave. She doesn't want to leave. She's the reason all this spooky stuff is happening. And they do seem to care about her and stuff. And then her car is driven into this tree and she just kind of dies. But it was kind of confusing if she drove the car into the tree herself, or if it was some force with the house. I wish I could check the book, because you get to hear what her final thoughts are. I think it's something of like, why did I do this, or whatever. I think it's that it's not really her that's doing this like supposed suicide. I mean, maybe that's why you don't get to hear the other characters comment on her death or anything. They just go back to their normal lives. Maybe they think it's a suicide or something. I mean, that's probably what it would look like to an outsider, of like, yeah, she drove into a tree, but we know as the reader that there's spooky stuff that's happening and ghosts and things. So I don't think Eleanor would be the kind of character, unless she was like driven to madness, which, I mean, maybe she was a little bit at this point of driving into this tree. But yeah, it was good. I was just surprised how short it was. I think I was just surprised because it had got turned into a Netflix series, so I assumed if it's a multi-episode... I'm assuming it's multi-episode. Let me see. Okay, yeah, it's loosely based on it. Yeah, okay, yeah, it is multiple episodes. It's like 10 episodes. I thought that I would have suspected that the story would have been longer, but it's a really, really short story, so we'll see. But I am looking at the Netflix thing. I'm reading a little bit about it. It's about a bunch of characters that are haunted about the house. That sounds kind of confusing. Oh, there's a follow-up series, The Haunting of Bly Manor. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. Oh, that's the other one I'm thinking of, but it's a different author, different series. Okay, so there's like a whole series, I guess, on Netflix of like these supernatural story shows, but this is the one that's based on The Haunting of Hill House. Okay. Interesting. Alrighty, well, maybe I'll watch it, maybe I won't, but I'm glad I read the book. It was good. Sounds like the TV series is different from the book. I don't really know by how much. I hope it's not too much, because I could see, because I think the story takes place within like a week or something. I could see that being like a whole show, basically. Alright, bye bye.